Hey, time for another video concert. Here's one called Widowmaker. Oh, hey, Widowmaker, won't you spare my life? I leave behind two little boys and a loving wife. Well, I've seen you in the forest hanging over me, cutting that timber under a rotten tree. 800 pounds of pine, 50 feet high. Keep your eyes on the saw, your mind on the sky. Hey, Widowmaker, won't you spare my life? I leave behind two little boys and a loving wife. Go down in a coal mine, a crack in the roof. The head miner, he warned me, better clear out and move. One fall of the jackstone would be the end of me. Montongo Mountain for all eternity. Hey, Widowmaker, won't you spare my life? I leave behind two little boys and a loving wife. In the stress of any working soul of 60 hours a week, that pressure's gonna take its toll, bend until you break. Working for a living, living just to work. That life is bound to break you down and leave you in the dirt. Hey, Widowmaker, won't you spare my life? I leave behind two little boys and a loving wife. It's a fun one to play. It gets the fingers warmed up for sure. Hope you're enjoying this. This is called a Blue Snowball. Blue Microphone makes these really cool USB mics, and so you should have a better audio experience for this concert. And I think I'm working out some of the bugs. To explain some of that, Widowmaker is a slang I've heard throughout Pennsylvania from different jobs. In the woods, you'll hear loggers talk about if you have a really ugly snag, a really bad tree with a dead top, that's a widowmaker. And the idea there is if it comes down and kills the man, his wife is a widow. And I realize that's it's sexist. It implies there are no women loggers, but I think the origin is from the old days. It goes way back. And so certainly there are women that work in the woods today. And the second verse is about coal miners. There are women that work in coal mine nowadays too. But years ago, if you had a man killed in the mines, you know, the rock that came down and killed him, which by the way is to this day still the number two killer. The number one killer of coal miners is black lung. But the second thing is just a rock fall. It doesn't take a massive cave-in to kill a person. It just takes a small rock, you know, seriously something the size of this guitar that would come loose and come down and catch you wrong. So that's a widowmaker. I didn't work it into this song because it was too late. I had already written the song, but I met an oil and gas field worker, and he said, yeah, we got certain wells that we call widowmakers. He said if a well has a lot of pressure in it, it's a widowmaker because they're the kind that can cause problems. They can blow pipe back out, and he was explaining all the different hazards of the job to me. I was at Smoke Country Jam, and he was telling me all about widowmakers in the gas fields. I thought that was fascinating. All right, second song. It's called Mountain Man's Dream. Right out my window here is beautiful Montour Ridge. And I've been enjoying hikes every day that I can sneak out and get a hike in. And just last week I got to do a hike that was on my all-time to-do list. And it's to go to a place a few miles to my west where Chillisquaque Creek comes in and touches Montour Ridge. In the 1730s, Shikellamy, Conrad Weiser, and John Bartram came through that area on their way back from New York State, on their way to Shamokin, which Sunbury used to be called Shamokin. And on their last night before they got back to Shamokin, they camped at the base of a great mountain where a fairly large stream came right up to the mountain. John Bartram says the stream was big enough to run 2 mills, so water wheel mills. They were always thinking about, ways to quote-unquote improve nature in the old days, so mills. He had to be talking about where Chillisquaque Creek comes into Monto Ridge. It makes perfect sense because right over the ridge is a straight shot into Sunbury. And then the last thing I'll just comment on is John Bartram commented how there were great giant trees, tulip poplars. He called them, did he call them magnolias? I think he called them magnolias, but they're tulip poplars he was talking about. And what was neat is on my hike, don't I encounter these giant tulip poplars. Now, granted, they're not the same ones he saw in the 1730s, but it might be their kids or grandkids that are still growing out there. Poplar's a fast-growing tree, so it is not unheard of to get a good 2 or 3 foot in diameter poplar in a century or less. I mean, they are fast growers. So. Wrote this song about 5 years ago. It's called Mountain Man's Dream. Today I walked on the mountain in woods I never have seen. I've spent my life on this mountain, living a mountain man's dream. A mountain man dreams of good country, land with plenty to spare. There's purity in the mountains, in the trees, the rocks, and the air. Travelers have crossed this mountain in the time before horse and road. Shikellamy, he camped at this mountain underneath great tall trees above. A mountain man dreams of good country, land with plenty to spare. There's purity in the mountains, in the trees, the rocks, and the air. There's places all around me, never seen by anyone's eyes. Some loggers, some hunters, some hikers, but most they just pass on by. A mountain man dreams of good country, land with plenty to spare. There's purity in the mountain, in the trees, and the rocks, and the air. Give me 40 more years on this mountain, 40 more years on this ground. I'll keep taking the road less traveled, searching for things to be found. A mountain man dreams of good country, land with plenty to spare. There's purity in the mountains, in the trees, the rocks, and the air. There's purity in the mountains, in the trees, the rocks, and the air. Oh wow, I haven't sung that in a while. That was really fun to be looking out the window at that mountain. I'll keep taking that road less traveled. I think that's a tip of the hat to my high school English teacher, Mr. Johns, Richard Johns. He taught some really great literature to us at Danville High School. And was it Robert Frost, the road less traveled, the road not taken? I'm a little rusty on my literature, but I remember the message, and that has stuck with me. I've always been the one that wants to take the road less traveled, and I think that's my hiking methodology too, don't get me wrong, I like a good trail, but I also like the absence of a trail. And so whenever possible, I like to just go. And sometimes that's where you find the coolest stuff. But sometimes also you get fooled. I remember, I'll tell you one last quick story. I was up on the mountain here with my boys a few years ago, and we were in a pretty rugged spot, really rugged. And I think I even said out loud to the boys, I was like, we're probably some of the first people to ever come to this specific spot. I'm like, you can't get a four-wheeler in here. I doubt that they even had any horses in here in the logging days. It was just that rough of a spot. And about that moment, we looked over and there was a beat-up old Pepsi can sitting by a rock. So we weren't the first. Hey, I'm going to switch to the banjo. Okay, get on the 5-string banjo for you. And just a request, I have the link for a tip jar in the description of this video. Folks, you've been so generous. You have not let me down yet. Seriously, every single video I've posted, someone's been generous enough to throw a couple bucks in the tip jar, and it really does help. I never realized how much financially my family and I counted on music income. It just kind of, it kept us a little bit more of a cushion, I don't know how else to put it, but the cushion is noticeably absent. So it's not just that I miss being out and playing music for people, but I got to admit I miss that little cushion that financially kind of helped. So I will just say again, thanks again for your tips. They've been very appreciated. And the link for the tip jar is up there. I'd be willing to bet many of you are in a very similar or worse position though, so I am not crying the blues. I'm simply saying, well, I guess I'm singing some blues here. I'm saying if you're in a position that you can help out, it is appreciated. If not, then just enjoy the songs. That's all I can say. Hey, a banjo song. This is called Tagging Out. When you work in the mines, you tag in every shift, and at the end of your shift, you move your tag over to the out column. And I can't tell you what year they started that, but if I were to guess, probably a good 100 years ago. It's been in practice a long time, maybe longer. And the thinking is the foreman and, if necessary, anyone who's leading an emergency situation like a rescue crew, they can show up at the mine and they can look at that tag board, the peg board, and they can see how many men or women are in, and then specifically who they are. And so every day, when I used to be a coal miner in Schuylkill County, I'm not sure how many of you knew I used to do that, but I worked for Gary Lucas and at G&S Coal, and I worked underground, and every day you'd have to tag in. And so I used to use my wedding ring when I worked in the mines. I would take my ring off because that's a federal law too. In the mines, you're not allowed to have jewelry on your hands because they could get injured even worse. If they got caught in a piece of machinery or something, it could be worse. So anyway, I'd have to take my wedding ring off every day. And so I use that as my tag in. I'd hang my wedding ring up on the peg. And here, to make this authentic, I'll see if I can get it off. Come on, you got this. All right. I'm still a married man, but I'm going to tag into the mine while I sing this song. Here we go. Every single miner that I've known has a scar on their skin or in their heart. You can only spend so long underground until the light of life goes dark. I'm tagging out for the last time. There's no more coal in me. I'm tagging out for the last time. This miner's going home and going clean. Of tagging in years ago when I started my first shift. It helped me become who I am and greet each day as a gift. But I'm tagging out for the last time. There's no more coal in me. I'm tagging out for the last time. This miner's going home and going clean. coal, but you can't take the coal from him. I've got the tattoos on my hands, that coal it is in my skin. I'm tagging out for the last time. There's no more coal in me. I'm tagging out for the last time. This miner's going home and going clean. Well, I'm proud it's a part of who we were, but I'm ready to let it go today. Give my kids a tomorrow where the coal stays buried away. I'm tagging out for the last time. There's no more coal in me. I'm tagging out for the last time. This miner's going home and going clean. And now that my shift is over, I'm going to tag back in. Oh, pardon me, I'm going to tag out. I tagged in when I went in the mine, now I tag out. Back to the guitar. I have 2 more songs planned for you, and hey, if you're able to, I'm always at the Elk Creek Cafe and Ale Works the first Thursday of every month, and that means this coming month, May 7th, I'll still be there on their Facebook page. So a very special concert planned for the first Thursday in May 7:30, and do tune in. That's going to be a lot of fun. I even have some guest musicians planned. This is called Bootjack Hill. Bootjack Hill is a real place on the way into Ridgeway, Elk County, Pennsylvania. I believe that's Route 209. You cannot miss it. And driven through there a few times, and this song kind of wrote itself. And I've got some harmonics that I put on this. So if you're not a guitar player, harmonics are typically when you're playing guitar, you're pressing the strings down. But a harmonic, you kind of hold your finger right above the string, and you're not really pushing down, and you get kind of this haunting. So that's called harmonics. So I think this is the only song I've ever written with harmonics. You can smell the brakes burning from the top of Bootjack Hill. Ridgeway's at the bottom. This mountain will test your will. This mountain will test your will. You can see the guardrail twisted from the crashes through the years. White crosses line the highway, the West Branch of Tears. The West Branch of Tears. In the heart of Elk County, unforgiving and steep, there's coal and there's timber, but the cost isn't cheap. You can ship it on triaxle, 22 tons apiece, but when winter takes Elk County, the shipping is gonna cease. Rail lines aren't much better. They wind their wicked way down the Clarion River Valley. It's a gauntlet of a grade. It's a gauntlet of a grade. Only hunters and woodsmen ventured years ago. For even the Indians, they hardly called it home. They hardly called it home. In the heart of Elk County, unforgiving and steep, there's coal and there's timber, but the cost isn't cheap. You can ship it on triaxle, 22 tons apiece, but when winter takes Elk County, the shipping is gonna cease. Smell the brakes burning on the top of Bootjack Hill. Ridgeway's at the bottom. This mountain will test your will. This mountain will test your will. And out there, the coal they're mining out in Elk County is bituminous coal, soft coal. And so there you go. Let's do one last song. This one is about your Danville Ironmen. Danville, known for its iron, really known for its T-rail is what inspired this song. The T-rail, the railroad track, the T-rail. It wasn't necessarily invented here in Danville, but it was first manufactured. Let me say this just right. The first place it was made in America, the T-rail, is thought to be Danville, PA. There's a tiny little discrepancy and disagreement out there on it, but I am comfortable saying exactly how I just said it. The first T-rail made in the United States, in my research, has been confirmed to be Danville. And even if you won't settle for that, well, how about this? Using anthracite coal, then we were absolutely, definitely the first to do it with anthracite coal. But I count it as two firsts. We were the first to do it in the United States, and we were the first to do it with anthracite coal. Without getting too much into the controversy, I will just say there's another site in Maryland. I believe it's is it Mount Savage? I believe Ironworks, and they did make some rails, some rails, but they are not what we consider nowadays as the T-rail. So I'm biased, born and raised in Danville, but I'm going to stick with it. Danville has the first T-rail. But even if you want to offer the concession and say, well, we were among the first, but we were certainly the first to do it with anthracite coal. I was reading firsthand accounts of these guys that used to work at the T-rail rolling mill. It's called a rolling mill. And if you can picture the way they would make T-rails here in Danville, it's wrought iron. You've probably heard of wrought iron. The way you make wrought iron is you heat up pig iron bars, which is cast iron. You heat it up and you get this giant ball. I believe it's 300 to 500 pound ball of, it's not liquid, but it's not solid. It's kind of a putty-like. And the men that did this were called puddlers. And they would heat that up in a puddling mill. And once it was just right, they'd use a giant overhead grab system with chains that were on a roller. And they would hoist this thing out with the weight of it being on some kind of a beam up above them, again with rollers and chains. And they'd work it down and put it into what's called the squeeze of the press. And the best description I can give you is picture a pitching machine for baseball or softball. You have two, at least I've seen them where there's two tires spinning toward each other and the ball goes between them and gets shot out towards the batter. Well, if you can picture that, that's the gist of how wrought iron is made. You'd put this ball of molten metal into the squeeze and it would get squeezed through once, and then you'd go to another set of rollers and they'd get squeezed through again. And depending on the surface of the rollers, you can make flat iron, you could have a curve to it, or how they made the T-rail is a little bit more elaborate, but you can hopefully in your mind see how you can manipulate that until it's coming through almost like a pasta machine, and you're squeezing it into the desired shape you want. And a couple important things are happening there. You're getting the desired shape you want, but you are also chemically changing the iron. It's no longer cast iron. Cast iron is very brittle. You maybe have noticed that. If you ever bang a cast iron pan or another piece of cast iron real hard, you will break it just like a piece of glass. Whereas wrought iron has flex to it, which is what you need for railroad track. If you're going to have a locomotive coming down the line, you can't have rigid iron. You've got to have a little bit of give to it. And by squeezing it, you arrange the iron molecules to be parallel, and that's what gives you that flex. rather than cast iron, which is every which way. The molecules are every which way and they're very rigid, which is great for strength, but not good if you want some flexibility. So think of, I've often said to folks, and I hope this is accurate, think of wrought iron as it's kind of iron that's becoming steel. It's not quite steel, but it's sort of this in between. It isn't cast iron and it isn't steel. It's sort of in between. So folks, I know I'm getting long-winded, but it's Danville and I'm passionate about Danville iron. When the T-rail would first get made, they were imperfect. So they'd go through these squeezes and these presses, and sometimes they were not perfectly straight. And I read a first-hand account of these men that would swing 80-pound sledgehammers and get any imperfections straightened out so the rails were perfect and ready for market. And I remember putting the book down and just trying to picture an 80-pound sledgehammer, and that's what led to the song. By the way, I have yet to find one, but if anyone out there knows where I can find in Granddad's, tool shed, if someone's got an 80-pound sledgehammer, I would love to have it. If nothing else, when I get invited into schools and I talk to young people about history, I would love to have that 80-pound sledgehammer. And, especially going into elementary schools and getting a volunteer. Okay, come up and swing this thing. And the kids won't even be able to lift it off the ground in most cases. What a great way to learn your history. To put those tools actually into the hands of the kids. Someone asked me, don't you think that's dangerous? I don't think they could lift it. So it's not dangerous if they can't lift it. I calculated it would be approximately a cinder block. Approximately a cinder block, small cinder block, is what we're looking at for an 80-pound sledge. If picture dumbbells, those are lift weights. I've never lifted an 80-pound dumbbell, but I've seen a 55, so that gives me a ballpark. It's big. And then I had to add 3 pounds in the song for the hickory or ash handle, which had to be as big around as a soda can. It had to be enormous. So, thanks for listening to my concert. Now you understand the last song. It's called the 83-Pound Hammer. 80 pounds of iron, 3 pounds of wood, 80 pounds of iron in a shower of sparks, swimming in fire. You may have seen rollers, you may have seen a press, but you have never seen a hammer like this. Well, I swing it all day at the rolling mill. It takes a mighty hammer to straighten the rail. 3 pounds of wood, 80 pounds of iron, 3 pounds of wood, 80 pounds of iron in a shower of sparks, swimming in fire. Takes 2 of us just to lift 1 rail, over 400 pounds, but we can do it well. We know we're being watched, we take pride in our work, and show them all what an Ironman is worth. 3 pounds of wood, 80 pounds of iron, 3 pounds of wood, 80 pounds of iron in a shower of sparks, swimming in fire. There are puddlers, helpers, and others on the shears, but there's no such thing as an easy job here. But I've found my place in this rolling mill, swinging my hammer on these T-rails. 3 pounds of wood, 80 pounds of iron, 3 pounds of wood, 80 pounds of iron in a shower of sparks, swimming in fire. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your support. Stay strong, stay together, and I hope to see you at Elk Creek May 7th on their Facebook page.